If you want to trade like a rebel, you got to come to RebelCon 2022. It's going to be in Dallas, Texas, at the fabulous Four Seasons Resort. It will be more fun and more live trading than we've ever done before. That's why it's called RebelCon 2022. We're going to have barbecues and double the amount of live trading. The guest speakers, as soon as we announce those, this thing's going to be sold out, limited to 250 people. Sign up now for RebelCon 2022 at the Four Seasons in Dallas, Texas.
Welcome to the rebellion.
Bang. Hey, folks, I am John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian, and we're here coming to you live, other sides of the world. I'm over here in Croatia. We don't know where Pete is. By the way, quick little look. Yep, that's the boat, looking out at the harbor and so forth. Just know how much some of you guys love that.
Or hate it, one way or the other. John, unfortunately, your audio has just gone out, so I'm going to jump in here, and we're going to jump right into what's going on within the markets right now as John gets his microphone taken care of. But always interesting, and that's what's going to happen. When one guy's in Croatia and the other guy's somewhere else in the United States, I mean, it does take a lot to make that all work together. But Coinbase kicking it off, and I'm still not hearing you, John, unfortunately, but this is one where a huge move today off of this BlackRock news. And the BlackRock news is this partnership to kind of ease the whole trade, the management of crypto. And if that is successful, this could be very, very big. It could be pretty daggone interesting. By the way, how about the timing of this? Cathie Wood just sold her third largest position, which was there. I mean, Cathie Wood unfortunately hammered it, John, virtually, call it at the lows in late July. July 25th to 6th, somewhere in there. And now here's the stock sprinting to the upside. It's up 14, 15, 16%. It's been higher. It got all the way up to 116 at one point. Now it's a lot closer to 94. Are you back, John?
I think I'm back, Pete. Are you hearing me still?
Yep.
I can hear you well. Pete's right. BlackRock partners up with Coinbase. The stock has moved up dramatically. We had several hits of unusual activity in this name, Pete. So I would caution people that not everybody trades options. We understand that. If we see call option activity, that's bullish. And we have had that in spades, Pete, in Coinbase, COIN. And, they've been buying. It was $53. July 26th. That was only a few days ago, folks. Yeah. It hit 116 already today. So bang. That's how fast this stuff moves. And that's why you got to be ready to roll. Hey, yep. Pete, what about another one that's really rocking and rolling today? Crocs. I know this is one you love to hate, Pete, but Crocs, they have Balenciaga Crocs. They have various, high-end Crocs that go for thousands, plural, of dollars.
That's crazy.
Now, the fact that it's just a plastic shoe that people kind of fell in love with, they make a lot of money on a plastic molded shoe versus something that the world has to stitch together, even if it's in Vietnam or China. Tell me what your thoughts are on Crocs, Pete.
Well, I can tell you the reaction that we're seeing is pretty strong today, John, because of the fact that when you look at their revenue, they look at their earnings, everything looks pretty decent, right? They're beating the expectations. Here's the problem. No one ever likes to hear that you're going to cut the forecast. And that's what they put out there. And because of that, just getting pretty slammed. I mean, when you consider things, John, it started off the year at $132 a share. It hit 47 in June. Yesterday, it was 77. And this is a stock that has been absolutely all over the place. And they do have growth. They have some pretty interesting growth, but they cut that growth in terms of the next quarter and the year. So that's part of the problem that we're facing here right now is People never like to hear that kind of news, and it makes it a pretty interesting trade. But fundamentally, John, that actually it doesn't trade at any ridiculous PEs or anything like that. So it's an interesting name for sure. And you're right. It's Hey Dudes, it's Crocs, it's all those kinds of things as far as the brand.
Yeah. So overall, Pete, I think you hold off on buying this one. I am
Yep.
not recommending it, but like Pete said, and I said, you make an injection molded plastic shoe that you sell for a lot of money. That's a good business model. What about Nikola, Pete? I know you have been all over this one. Unusual activity also, literally like 5 or 6 hits in the last month. And
Yeah.
a hit, folks, is when we see unusual activity, meaning institutional buying of call options or puts. If it's calls, it's bullish. Puts, it's bearish. This has been all calls, Pete. And the stock was up 5.5%, hitting a 3-month high. There's only a few stocks that can actually say that, and this is one of them.
Yeah, pretty powerful, John. I mean, the EV space, as you and I talked about many times already here on the Rebel's Edge and other spots, it's been on fire. Absolutely been on fire. Almost daily, we are seeing Tesla and Nikola and ChargePoint and all those different factors. So it's not just the vehicle makers themselves, it's everything that goes into it, the batteries and so forth, and the charging units. So it's really pretty interesting. When I look at Nikola, John, yeah, they beat on the revenue, and the earnings is always going to be a struggle, I think, early on for this company. But when you see those revenue numbers, I think people were impressed by that. And let's not forget, when you've got a short interest like Nikola has, anytime you get anything positive, that squeeze starts to come into play, John. And I think that's why we saw that stock start to rocket. Matter of fact, it traded the entire day's average volume in the first 90 minutes. That gives you a little idea how active people were in Nikola.
Yeah. And folks, again, when they buy calls, we're saying even if you don't trade call options on calls or puts, that is a bullish trade. So we have had 5 weeks of bullish trades in this name. And then today it makes that big move to the upside, narrower than expected losses, a ton of unusual activity. Pete, what about Fortinet? I know that you more than me are feeling like maybe it's time to nibble.
Maybe, John. I think it's just interesting because cybersecurity is probably one of the areas where you just have to look at that and say, do we need more of this going into the future? Will there be demand? And my answer would be 100%. Now, that being said, I still look at the multiple, John. It's still extremely high. It's somewhere up in the 50s, 60s, somewhere in there as far as the PE multiple, which is price to earnings. So that's one of the things that we use to kind of measure the value of companies. But I think that the reality is, John, they've got growth in front of them. I mean, when you look at their earnings growth of 26%, revenue at 29%, that gives you a little bit of an idea of how powerful this company is. But they also disappointed because of the outlook. And because of that, the stock has gotten absolutely hammered. Now, was the outlook that bad? I'm not so sure. So that's why I'm considering it, John. If I make a move, I absolutely will alert everybody to that. I haven't made one yet, but I'm certainly staring right at it as we speak and considering whether or not it might be a good time to enter.
Yeah. Well, Fortinet, folks, like Pete says, internet security. We all need more of that. This stock is near the 52-week low, trading down 16% today. We don't have unusual in this one yet, but Pete's getting ready to nibble, and I'm thinking he's not wrong. Might be a pretty nice area. All right, Pete, let me hit you up with one more unusual activity in this segment of the.
Boy, unfortunately, I think we're having difficulty with John again. That's going to happen sometimes. We did have some difficulty with John. So I'm going to move on past Array. I talked about that one on the take this morning as well. Some of the unusual option activity that we were seeing in there. Pretty interesting. I'm going to jump right to AMD now. Now, when you look at AMD, this is a stock that has been kind of wavering around a little bit, but had some monster option buying just the other day. I talked about it on the take. The stock was trading below 100 and then skyrocketed to the upside well above 100. They were buying the 100 strike calls that expire tomorrow. Well, I'm out of those, but They came back in and bought 22,000 of the August 5th, which is tomorrow, the 103 calls today. Gives you an idea of just how hungry people are for this name. 40,000 the other day, and then they come back for 22,000 more, just looking at AMD to make some sort of a big move to the upside. And oh, by the way, it's already delivered. So a really, really powerful move. You go back to mid-July, not that terribly long ago, a couple weeks ago, stock was 78. Now we're in the 103s. And when they were buying these calls, the stock was at 102. Gives you an idea of how fast things are moving in certain areas of the market. And by the way, that's with AMD doing so well on a day where we've been mostly negative throughout the session. When you look at the Dow, you look at the NASDAQ and so forth. So even more powerful of a move. John, how's your mic doing?
Well, I'm not sure, Pete. We had to switch mics. Are you hearing me okay now?
I do. It's a little bit crinkly, but we hear you pretty well. So go on.
A little crinkly. Well, that's kind of like me, Pete, after too many of these. I'd say right now, Pete, I'm watching Array, ARRY. This one, bullish call buying. The stock was just underneath $17 a share. And they were buying the September 1750 calls. So that means to me that the stock only has to move that far, 50 cents, for these calls to be pretty near and dear and reward people that took a shot on them. I like that, but nonetheless, Pete, I will be buying the at-the-money call, the 17s, not the 1750s. And then my hopes are that I'll sell 1-to-1 for every call that I buy. I'll sell a higher strike call against it. If you're just a stock trader, then I think you just trade the stock and see whether or not you can get a little scalp on this one. But I like what Array is doing, Pete, ARRY.
John, we're going to jump off now to sports, which is always a great time. And I'll tell you, when I'm looking at what's going on in the NFL right now, boy, the shield is getting a few little shots into that NFL shield. And I'm sure the NFL is not happy about it. Number one was Deshaun Watson, right? I mean, that's an issue. And first of all, the judge decided 6 games. Well, the NFL thinks it should be an entire season. So that's something that's already topical. But then add Stephen Ross into the mix of what's going on here. Now, they called this unprecedented violations. Now, that says a lot because we've had violations in the NFL before. If you remember, we had Inflategate, we had Spygate, we had Bountygate with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, we've had a lot of different things happening, but Stephen Ross down with the Miami Dolphins, the majority owner, boy, John, he was doing some tampering that you just wonder, what are you doing? I mean, I know he wants to win. We all know that. But Stephen Ross went out and literally tried to get Tom Brady, who was under contract with Tampa, to come to Miami. Forget that part of it. How about going to Sean Payton and trying to get him? And New Orleans did deny the request. And so they said no when he was asked. And yet he still apparently had conversations with Sean Payton to try to get him to coach the Miami Dolphins. So there's a lot going on. They've got some penalties, but have you ever seen anything quite as odd and interesting as this, John, in the NFL?
Well, Pete, as you know, one of my favorite expressions is beware the self-made man, because they worship the maker. In this case, Stephen Ross is a self-made man, and he doesn't think his stuff smells, Pete. So just like Elon, I can have people that I love and people that I'm not as friendly with, that I'm not as fond of how they handle themselves. But Stephen Ross has been, for the most part, a great promoter of his old school, Michigan. But the question is he playing a little fast and loose down there with the Dolphins? And if the answer is yes, Pete, this could be one of the biggest fines the NFL has ever levied. That's what I'll say about Stephen Ross.
Yeah, it's an amazing situation, really, and the lengths in which they went. But obviously, that's going to play out as well. John, speaking of that, we're talking about Canton, Ohio. We're going to go back to a little football talk because we finally have NFL back. Now, I know it's a preseason game. I understand that whole thing. And Trevor Lawrence, he's not going to be playing. And that's the usual thing. You don't want your quarterbacks to get hurt. You don't want anybody to get hurt. But Travis Etienne, the running back who did get hurt last year, he's gotten pulled from this game as well. But what do you think about the Hall of Fame game, John? I mean, we've got the Raiders, we've got the Jaguars, it should be a lot of fun. Even without the stars out there, we got football back in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's always an exciting time, Pete,
Yeah.
for you and for me. It's a love-hate relationship. I hated getting cut, but I loved it when I was on the team with the Bears. And you were on, I think, 5 or more different teams.
Got cut a
so
lot.
You have a completely different relationship with it. But I do love to see it. And it's in an old stadium, Pete, a small stadium.
Yeah.
This is not like one of those mega stadiums where it's 70, 80, 100,000. This is like, a small town, Canton, Ohio. This isn't where you see these kinds of crowds, except for this game.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think it's got that first blush of what's going to happen in the season and how are the sportscasters covering it. I'm really looking forward to it, Pete. I will be tuned in from over here through my VPN.
Well, it should be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it too. And I'm sure the Raiders are going to have a lot of players not playing in this as well, but that doesn't really matter. It's great to see football back, the real jerseys, the real helmets, everything about the NFL.
Yep.
And hopefully that can take some of the tarnish off of what's happened to the NFL Shield of late. So that's something that we'll see all played out, but it's great to have football back with the NFL.
Yeah. And folks, we encourage you strongly to check out, marketrebellion.com/Dallas to check out RebelCon, which Pete and I will be there. Most of the team. I mean, I think most of the 22 different coaches and mentors will be there in Dallas at the Four Seasons. I mistakenly said they're changing over to the Ritz. Turns out it's still the Four Seasons, Pete. Maybe there was some tampering by Mr. Ross down there too. But you can check it out, marketrebellion.com/Dallas. And we will be back Monday with another Rebels Edge. We hope you guys all tune in. Have a great one. Pete will be on tomorrow with The Take at 10:30 a.m. And I'll be back with 3 at 3 today and tomorrow. Bang. See you then.
See ya.